سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدايا.
What we're going to do is we're going to start Insha'Allah with some recitation of the Quran and some verses of that, and then we will begin Insha'Allah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل آمنا بالله وما أنزل علينا وما أنزل على إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى والنبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. ومن يبتغي غير الإسلام دينا فلن يقبل منه وهو في الآخرة من الخاسرين. كيف يهدي الله قوما كفروا بعد إيمانهم وشهدوا أن الرسول حق وجاءهم البينات والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. أولئك جزاؤهم أن عليهم لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين خالدين فيها لا يخفف عنهم العذاب ولا هم ينظرون إلا الذين تابوا من بعد ذلك وأصلحوا فإن الله غفور رحيم. إن الذين كفروا بعد إيمانهم ثم ازدادوا كفرا لن تقبل توبتهم وأولئك هم الضالون.
Say, we Muslims believe in God and in what has been sent down to us and to Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes. We believe in what has been given to Moses, Jesus, and the prophets from their Lord. We do not make a distinction between any of the prophets. It is to him that we devote ourselves. If anyone seeks a religion other than Islam, complete devotion to God, it will not be accepted from him. He will be one of the losers in the hereafter. Why would God guide people who deny the truth after they have believed and acknowledged that the messenger is true, and after they have been shown clear proof? God does not guide evildoers. Such people will be rewarded with rejection by God, by the angels, by all people. And so they will remain with no relief or respite for their suffering. Not so those who afterwards repent and mend their ways. God is most forgiving and merciful. Although the repentance of those who having believed, then increase in their disbelief, will not be accepted, they are the ones who have gone far astray.
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala sahbihi ajma'in. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Welcome everyone to this special event. I want to start by sharing an anecdote. So I was wondering how to start, and then someone I met in the masjid today, and he shared an anecdote with me. Some years ago, Sheikh Yasir Qadi, whom you all know, so he was giving a lecture in a masjid, and he was sitting on a chair like I am, and the audience was sitting on the floor. So he spotted someone in the audience who was sitting on the floor, and then Yasir Qadi began to weep, and he said to the organizers that, how can I be sitting on a chair while this man is sitting on the floor, and he should be sitting on a chair. He shouldn't be left to sit on the floor. So that man was Moazzam. So I'm sorry to start with an embarrassing anecdote. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I think it was soon after you came back. So I'm honoured to welcome Brother Moazzam Begg from Birmingham to Tooting, and to come and share with us some of his wisdoms and insights. I'm sure he doesn't need any introduction. Moazzam is from Birmingham. Were you born there as well? Born, brought up in Birmingham. He doesn't have the accent though, so I don't know, something went wrong along the way. And he was born, brought up there, and for more than 30 years now, he has been involved in dawah, in activism, in not just in this country, but in countries around the world. In the 90s, he went to Bosnia. After that, he went to Afghanistan. He was also involved in the war in Chechnya. He, after the war, when the war in Afghanistan it began, then he was captured, and he spent 3 years in Guantanamo Bay. He was one of the British detainees that spent time in Guantanamo Bay. After he came back, he toured the country, he wrote a book, he toured the country, he shared his experiences. When the war began in Syria, he went to Syria, and after he came back from Syria, soon after that, then he was arrested again, and he was put into Belmarsh prison for a few months, and the case against him collapsed. So I'm very honored to have someone with this much experience and insights and wisdom to be with us tonight, and to be able to share some of his experiences with us. Before I ask my first question, I want to start by sharing another anecdote, and hopefully something that will set the theme for this evening, Insha'Allah. So 31 years ago, December 1992, I went to Bosnia, and we were in this village that had been surrounded by the Serbs. So for those of you that don't know, Bosnia was a genocide of Muslims that took place in the 1990s, between 1992 and 1995. And many horrific things happened to the Muslims. In some ways, I don't like to compare, in some ways comparable, and in some ways some very horrific things happened there. So I was there with a group of brothers. I went as an aid worker, and then they took part in the fighting efforts. So there was a battle that took place. So we were in a village that was surrounded by the Serbs, and one night our commander, he said that we should attack the positions of the Serbs who are surrounding us. So it was nighttime, we attacked their positions, and all of their return fire, I noticed, and I was only 18 at the time, and this was the first time I'd experienced something like this, all of their return fire was going in the air. And we didn't have any helicopters, we didn't have any planes. There was about 30 of us, we just had small arms. And all of their return fire went up in the air. And even after all, when our ammunition finished and we just withdrew and we went back to the village, and they kept on firing, and they were firing in the air because you could see the tracer rounds going up into the air. Now, so that stuck with me. So 3 years later, after the genocide at Srebrenica, then I was in Bosnia again, and there was another battle that took place, and in one of the base camps there was a group of about 12 prisoners, Serb prisoners of war, that had been captured, and they were sitting in a room. And I remember I went to see these prisoners, and there was a Bosnian brother who spoke English, and he was guarding them. And I asked him to translate for me while I asked them the question. And I asked him about this. I said, 3 years ago we were involved in a fight with your soldiers, with your colleagues, and why was your return fire going up in the air? What were you firing at? Like we were here, you could see our muzzle flashes, but why was your return fire going up in the air? So then he said something, I didn't know the Bosnian language, he said something in his language, and as he said it, one of them said something to me, replied, and as he said it, the other 10 or 12 people, they looked at each other and nodded, oh yeah, yeah. It was like something, it didn't seem surprising what he said. It wasn't surprising, it was just like, oh yeah. It was just like one of those things. So the Bosnian brother, he looked at me and he said, sky people? Sky people. So this isn't a story that I found on TikTok or I found somewhere and I'm like, he said this to me. So I was there present. This prisoner, he said this to me. Not a Muslim prisoner, a Serb prisoner. I said, what do you mean sky people? And then he described, he goes, tall people wearing white and they're attacking us from the sky. And these were Allah's angels. So this is 1995, I think September or October, something like that I'm telling you. We are all gathered here because we are in pain. We are in pain. We are in despair, we are in pain, we are suffering a collective trauma of what is happening to the Muslims in Gaza, on top of the other traumas that are happening. But this is not the first time that Muslims have been on the back foot. This is not the first time that we have gone through situations like this. And I hope that throughout the course of this evening, Insha'Allah, we will be talking about, and I hope that we'll be sharing some stories of examples of when Allah's help came at times when all hope was lost. And hopefully we will take away from that lessons for the challenges that we are facing in our own lives. And in addition to Gaza, and Gaza came at a time when all of us are already having challenges in our own lives, whether it's financial challenges, whether it's health challenges, whether it's education or whatever it is, status or papers. But I'm hopeful that by the end of this evening, we will all benefit from something like this. So I think my first question, or to start with the brother Moazzam, is to share a story like that from your travels, something like that. You saw things, whether it happened at Guantanamo or not. An example of where you saw that Allah's help came at a time when all hope was lost.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I'd like to thank you all at Musammal Masjid, everybody who organized this from the Friday Circle for inviting me. May Allah Azza wa Jal make this gathering one that is beneficial for all of us here on the Qiyamah, inshallah. I mean, in answer to your question, there's so many examples, it's hard to list which one to start off with. But just a few weeks ago, I did something that I didn't think was going to be possible ever after my incarceration in Guantanamo, but prior to that in Babar and Kandahar by the Americans. Bagram was a place where I saw two Afghan prisoners beaten to death by the American soldiers. One of them with his hands tied above his head to the top of the cage, and he was repeatedly punched and kicked until he died. The autopsy report said that had he survived, his leg when he was kicked would have required amputation, and they kicked him over 100 times on that leg. And the reason why they kicked him is because they found it amusing that every time they kicked him with this peroneal strike, which is like a Thai boxing style kick to subdue a resistant prisoner, he said Allah, Allah. And so they found it amusing that he said Allah, Allah. So the soldiers went past him that night and kicked him repeatedly to see how often he would say it. And that's what caused the blood to clot in his leg and eventually caused a heart attack and he died. I returned just a few weeks ago to this place not with the Americans in charge, but with the prisoners who were with me in charge. The very prisoners who were held with me in Guantanamo, some of them for 14 years without charge or trial, some of them beaten, tortured, stripped naked, violated in ways it's hard to describe, which I'm sure a lot of you know. Those people facilitated my meeting and went with me and are now senior ministers in their government. And in that place were people like Mullah Abdul Salam Zaid, who was at the time the ambassador to Pakistan and the spokesman, the official spokesman of the Taliban. He was held with us there. And amongst others were Mullah Abdul Wakil, at the time was the defense minister, and many others. Mullah Khairullah Khairkhwa now is the Minister of Information. Mullah Fazl Mazloom is now the Deputy Minister of Defense. Mullah Abdul Haq Wasib is now the head, the Minister for Intelligence. Mullah Nurullah Nouri is now the head of the Minister for Tribal and Border Affairs. So what you've got is the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jal had a plan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a plan. Allahumma al-malik al-mulk, tu'ti al-mulka man tasha, wa tanzi' al-mulka mimman tasha, wa tu'izzu man tasha, wa tudhillu man tasha, biyadika al-khayr, innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. This is an evidence of this beautiful verse. Oh Allah, you are the King of Kings. You give dominion to whoever you wish. You take it from whoever you wish, and you give it, you bestow it upon whoever you wish, from your powerful hands, and you're able to do all things. And so to see something like this, I think at a time when we're seeing Gaza, we're seeing where is the help going to come from? In the end, with patience, al-isti'ana bis-sabr was-salah, really I've seen this evident in a way I could never have imagined at the time when we were being humiliated, tortured, murdered. You could never have thought a time like this would have come.
You mentioned isti'ana bis sabr and salah, which means seeking help with sabr and salah. One of the things I've come to learn is the term sabr. When we say the term sabr, people automatically they translate it as patience. But that's not really an accurate translation of the term sabr. The term sabr is a term that includes patience, it includes hope, it includes waiting for relief, it includes being steadfast, and it includes waiting for things to get better. It doesn't mean just sitting there and doing nothing, but waiting for something to happen. When you were first taken to Guantanamo, so you're in Afghanistan, in Kandahar, I believe they took you to Kandahar and they put you into these the C-130 Hercules. And at that time, I can't even imagine what's going through because part of you is like surreal, like this isn't happening. This is not, it's not happening, and you're maybe in some sort of nightmare, and it's gonna wake up. So your brain is going through all of these things. So you're put into this plane, and you don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to happen to you. God knows what's going through your. Tell us a little bit about that, about yourself and about others and other brothers who were there. Describe that scene to us when you're put in blindfold and you're put into this plane. What is going on in your brain and what's happening?
So this is the point at which I was handed over by the Pakistani secret intelligence, the ISI, to the American military. It was in a military air base in Islamabad. And we had no shoes, we had just the clothes on our back, and we were hooded. It was me and maybe, I don't even know how many there were there. There was probably about 10. Because I couldn't see, and the hood was over my head. I heard then the sounds of American soldiers. And I thought, I don't know why I thought the good guys are here. I actually thought, well, yeah, the cavalry's here. It's just this thing that we're brought up with over in the UK. The movies. You hear those sounds. First you'll be hearing all these Pakistani, Urdu sounding, uncles, and, to be polite to them. But then you start hearing the American accents and you think automatically some people work in the West, the good guys are here. It wasn't the good guys, the bad guys were here. And the bad guys came along and said, after I asked them, I said, you're not going to torture us, are you? We don't do that, son. That's what he said. And he was lying to his back teeth. What they did then next is to put me into the ruku position, the bowing position. And my hands behind my back, and each soldier puts a hand through, as you've probably seen, so that you're almost, if they were to lift you up, they would dislocate your shoulders. So it's in this position with a hood, my legs shackled, and my hands behind my back. They took me into this, what clearly was a plane I couldn't see, but it was evident from the roar of the engines. We're passing by dogs that are barking, the screaming of prisoners. The soldiers are swearing at us in Urdu, in Farsi, in Arabic, Pashto, every word they can think of that they've learnt.
And then you've got the sound of the aeroplane.
And the sound of the engines of the aeroplane. So you've got this all massive noise all taking place at the same time. And despite the hood, I can make out the flashes of photographs they're taking from trophy pictures of us. And they forced me onto the ground in this airplane, this C-130 plane. And I sat down and they put a strap across my legs, across my ankles, across my legs, and then in between my arms. So literally, I'm immobile. And at this point, as you were asking, what am I thinking? It's all happening simultaneously. With a hood over your head, the first thing a person thinks, especially when there are armed people around him, he thinks he's going to be executed. It's just a natural thing that you see this in the imagery. Somebody's hooded, he's going to be shot. So I thought maybe that's one of the things going to happen. And as I'm sat there, I noticed by somebody speaking to me, Assalamu alaikum akhi. I say, wa alaikum salam, over all the noise. And I feel, alhamdulillah, at least there's somebody here with me that communicate, I can't see. He asks me where I'm from. In Arabic, he speaks to me and I reply, I'm from UK, Pakistan. He says he's Libyan. And then he says things which were really, I didn't expect. I didn't think about it, to be honest with you. It didn't cross my mind at this point. I would have thought about it maybe later, but not now. But he said, Akhi, هل صليت صلاة المغرب? Have you prayed Maghrib prayer? And I thought to myself, how is that going through his head? Why is he asking that question? Why is he asking, Akhi, where are we going? What are they going to do with us? He's saying, Akhi, أظن وقت الصلاة قد دخل. I don't know how he knows that either. He's saying, I think, brother, that the prayer time has entered. I don't know how you would know that. But that's what he thought. So I say to him, no, brother, I haven't prayed. And I wanted to say to him, I wasn't even thinking about praying right now. But he says, essentially, let's pray. I said, you're on the left, so you're the imam. As I speak to him, there's an American soldier, he comes along and he puts a knife to my neck. And he says, if you speak again, and he swears, I'll slit your throat. And at this point, the brother says, Allahu Akbar. And now I'm in a state of salah. So I cannot break my prayer now. And even though it's scary to have a knife at your throat, there's a side of you that thinks, what better way to die could there be than in this state? Of course you're terrified. But the brother now is reciting, I can barely hear it. What I heard loudest was Allahu Akbar. the knife slid away. And as you can see, my neck's still intact.
You're still here. So, you know, sometimes when so you'll be working in a company, or you have an exam or a lecture, and salah is like, you know, people are scared to ask permission from their boss. Can I go to Friday prayer? Can I go to Dhuhr prayer? And here you have an example of brothers who are in the mouth of the enemy. They're being captured, and they have knives held to their throats, and able to make salah without caring about what they are thinking. Because at that, as you said, at that point, I thought, what better way to die than what better way to die than you are in a state of salah. Now, in Guantanamo, you ended up in Guantanamo, and there are different things that were being told, and obviously we know you came home and you're back, and you met your family again and everything. But at that time, you didn't know that. You didn't know that. You didn't know what's happened to your family. You didn't know what's happened to your kids. You don't know what's going to happen to you. Are you going to live? Are you going to die? Are you going to spend the rest of your life in prison? And what is there that at that moment when was it Camp Echo? Is that what it was called? What is there? What kept you going? When you woke up in the morning, what kept you going through the night where you thought, you know what, I should just take my life and just end this because I can't take this? What made you get up in the morning? Is maybe what I'm trying to ask in that state.
Okay, I mean, before I make reference to Guantanamo, Babar is so important to me because I was there for 1 year.
Go ahead, talk about it.
As I returned there just now, again, it was completely surreal, but I returned with a brother who I met there and was with me in prison, and then together we eventually went to Guantanamo. I couldn't recognize it. And I couldn't recognize it because so many changes have been made over the years. It was very difficult. I thought, I don't even know if this is the right place. And then he said, Akhi, do you remember? You might not remember everything. Do you remember the ceiling? I looked up and I said, oh my God, I recognize it now. Sometimes it's those little things. And he said, do you remember we met right here? This is the point at which we met. And I said, yeah, I do remember. I remember because I was at that time in the process of memorizing Surah Al-Baqarah without a teacher. I had no teacher. So even now when I have Surah Al-Baqarah, I know I have many mistakes because I didn't have a teacher. I had to do it by myself. And I had to do it by myself because speaking aloud, reciting aloud, calling the adhan, praying in jama'ah, anything, even talking, had you taken forcibly by the guards and tied with your hands above the cage to the cage door with a hood over your head, and you were placed in that place sometimes for hours, and I've seen people in that state for days.
These are Americans doing that?
These are American soldiers doing this, yeah. So, if you ask me what is it that made me get through all of this, it took me almost a year, and I managed to memorize Surah by myself. And I can tell you, out of all the things, I'd seen 2 people murdered, I'd been subjected to torture. They made me believe that a woman was in the next cell screaming, which there was. They made me believe it was my wife. Out of all of that, seeing the beating, the constant abuse of prisoners, sometimes taking us out all, I don't like to describe it, but taking the prisoners out with no clothes on at all, and hosing them down. All of that, I said, alhamdulillah, that it took me time to memorize any large verses of the Quran, large surah of the Quran. But to be able to memorize the largest in that situation, it was, alhamdulillah, out of all the dark days, that was the best day when I said, I've done it. And it's those types of things that you do something that you never expected, you never have done. I know I never would have done that as a free man.
So one of the questions that officers, they often ask me when I was 6 years isolation in a unit in this country, in a prison. There were 7 of us, 7 to 12 detainees at various times. And in America also, when I was in isolation, far from home, in a supermax prison. And a supermax prison is a prison which it's meant for prisoners who are so dangerous that they cannot be kept in general population with other prisoners. And if anyone here has been to prison in the UK, then a supermax is, like 1 day in a supermax is like a year in a high security prison in the UK. You would have, for example, the regime was 24 hours a day, you're locked in your cell, you don't have any contact with any other prisoners. I remember in 2 years, I shook hands once with another prisoner, because you're not allowed to have any. It just so happened is that we were both on our way to the recreation cage, and he happened to be there, and I said, hey, he was a friend of mine, and I said, I've known you for like a year and a half, I haven't even shaken your hand. And then we extended our hands and we shook hands, and then we hugged as well. He was a Latin King's gang member. He was one of the most senior prisoners, or one of the most respected prisoners in that prison. So one of the questions that guards often they would ask me, and they would say that, how do you get through it? So we have the saying that I learned in prison, and you'll remember in life. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. So you see all of these tough guys, you know, the guys who chat the chat, and the big muscles, and they're all talking about like, about how many people they've killed, or how much money they've stolen, or all these conquests and exploits that they've done. These same people, you see them in prison, and they are the quietest and they are the humblest of people, because they are beaten down to size, and they find it very difficult to struggle there. And it's the quiet ones that are able to somehow make it through. So the officers would see myself and the other Muslim detainees, and they'll see us wake up in the morning, smiling, laughing, joking with each other. And they would often ask that, how do you do it? Because if I was in your position, you've been in prison for years without trial, you don't know what's going to happen to you, you're going to go to America, you might never come home to your family, how are you able to smile? And I would always say to him the same 2 things I would say to him. I'll say to him that, firstly, I believe in a God, and therefore I know that whatever I'm going through today, there is a wisdom in it, which I don't know today. I might find out tomorrow, or next week, or next month, or next year, but I know that He has some wisdom that I don't know yet. And secondly, I believe in a hereafter. So I know that whatever I am going through, and whatever wrong has been done to me, I don't have to worry about getting justice for it, because I send that to His department. He will sort that out in the hereafter. So having this thing constantly to look forward to, Salah or the Quran, it is something that it gets you through the situations where you can't find the strength to get through. The next question I want to ask you, Moazzam, I want to ask about, now, obviously I've read your book, I read it a few times, you sent it to me, and I've still got it, the signed copy. I was in prison, and you sent it to me soon after it came out. What would you say, what was one of the most difficult, for you personally, what would you say was your lowest point in that point from when you were captured in Pakistan, in Islamabad, up to the point that you are released? So whether it's background, or whether it's Guantanamo, or it's Kandahar, or it's on the way. For you personally, there must have been something that stands out, like the lowest point, or one of the lowest points. And what was that, and how did you get through it?
I think again making reference to my return to Afghanistan, the return to Babar. I recently went there with Clive Savage, who I first met in Guantanamo, in solitary confinement, in maximum security, isolation, Camp Echo, where I've been for 2 years. I first saw this man there, so even returning to Bagram, or returning to Afghanistan rather, with him is something I couldn't have imagined that one day he will be walking in the streets of Kabul. And one of the things we were doing in my trip was investigating and finding eyewitnesses to what happened to Afia Siddiq. And we found one person who was witness to when she was physically taken, and another who was next to her in a cell for a month in Babar. And the story of Afia Siddiqui gets connected to mine because of something that I encountered in Babar, which was the most painful and horrific thing. As men, we're certainly growing up and learning and fighting skin as you become accustomed to some level of being able to deal with violence that's been used upon. But what you couldn't imagine, especially in a place like everything I've told you that took place in Babar and the type of treatment, you couldn't imagine a mother, a woman, perhaps your wife, perhaps your mother, perhaps your sister, perhaps your daughter, perhaps your aunt or your niece, or any of that being in a place like that. You just could not imagine it. So when I used to hear those screams, well, they tied me up and showed pictures of my family, waving them in front of me, saying, whilst that scream is happening, saying, where do you think your family is right now? What do you think happened to them the night that we took you? Insinuating, without saying, we have your family in custody. And that's your wife's screams. That to me was the lowest point. And I simultaneously felt two different things. One was, do anything, whatever you want, let me sign any paper, I'll sign a blank sheet of paper, stop that and end it. And the other was, take these shackled hands and wrap them around this man's neck and strangle him. Simultaneously.
So you did sign the paper, because I saw it. I read it in America. So, in America, I get to America, and I'm sitting in a cell in this supermax prison with my lawyer, and they show me a document, and it's written by Moazzam. It's Moazzam's confession, and it wasn't at Guantanamo. It was in, I think, Kabul or Bagram, I think it was.
It was Guantanamo.
Was it? No, there was two. One was in Guantanamo, and this one.
So what happened is that the same agents,
sanitized.
So the same agents who came to Bagram then returned to Guantanamo, and they came with a document which they had written. I didn't write it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because when I saw that straight away, then I laughed, because that was written by Martin Begg, and he's talking about basically he in that statement, I think it's about two or three pages long, and it had your signature at the end, and it's basically saying that I was directly responsible for the September 11th terrorist attacks. I played a direct role in it because of when I went to Afghanistan, I think because when I went to Bosnia, because I did this and because I did that. And I think you repeated that, you, inverted commas, repeated that a number of times in that statement. And I wasn't allowed to have a copy of it, but I'm just telling you from memory. I just laughed when I saw that. And it's like I laughed, and there was also a bit of sadness, because I felt that, and I know about them for like some 30 years or so. I thought, what was this man, what was he going through to go through this confession, to agree to sign something like that, which straight away I knew was complete nonsense, and he came home. If he really had done something like that, he wouldn't be sitting here. What must he have been going through in order to sign that document, or that so-called confession? you know, people say confessions extracted under torture, and we have like these images of what that actually means. But mentally, when you're in a place, and I mean now as you described, that this is what you're going through. This is what you're going through. That you've been in a cell where you've had screaming. They're showing you pictures of your family, and all of these psychological tricks to try and damage you. Something else I want to ask you is talking about on this subject of like miracles or signs or divine signs. Now we know as Muslims that, and people that have suffered from calamities and hardships would have seen this, that there are times that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicates with you through dreams. People that have been through cancer, they have told stories about seeing certain dreams when they're at their lowest point. People that have had injuries, people that have had loved ones that were close to them that died, or otherwise that were suffering in some way, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them hope through dreams. Are there any dreams of yours that you remember during your ordeal in Babar, in Qatar, in Guantanamo? Are there any one that you remember and that you are comfortable sharing? If you're not, it's okay.
I rarely have dreams that are memorable, but there was one that was so memorable I began my book with it. But I didn't see this dream in Babar or Guantanamo or in prison. I saw it in my bed in 1993 when I was a free man. And in my dream I see myself walking with other prisoners around and around. And there are soldiers above us pointing guns. And I remember it was my Arabic teacher who was with me in this. And I say to him, brother, how long are we going to take this humiliation? And he says, sabr, brother, sabr, have patience, have patience. And when he says that, they start shooting. I don't know who these soldiers are at the time. They start shooting and people start falling. And then in the dream, it's as if I look at myself from above. And I don't know what to do. So I call the adhan as loud as possible. And it echoes, it leaves the walls of this prison and it echoes really loudly. And then someone shouts to me and says that you're going to have a child, but you will not see that child for a long time. And as the dream continues, I start to raise my hands. And again another voice says, raise your hands to ask for deliverance from this humiliation. My hands they go past, they don't stretch arms from, they go right through the roof. They go into the clouds. And I'm making the dua, oh Allah, remove this humiliation from us. And I begin to cry in the dream. And I wake up in tears. My wife asked me what happened. So I told her this was the dream. When I walked into the Babar detention facility, this was the first place, it wasn't the only place, but it was the first place where there were soldiers on what's known as Overwatch walking around. But also it was the first place where we were allowed to walk around in a circle together only after I asked them to give us half an hour a day, because before that we weren't even allowed to walk. And during one of those walks, a brother tried to escape and he was beaten to death in front of me. So I wrote back to my wife saying, do you remember that dream, the only dream I'd ever spoken to you about? That came true.
On the subject of dua, one of the things that when sometimes in your life you're going through a situation or a hardship and you're making dua to Allah for something, you want to get into a particular school or university, or you want a particular job, or there's some sickness that you want to be healed from, or so these are routine du'as that we all make, and there's no sort of urgency to it. Like, it's not like, okay, you know, you're making du'as, let me get into this university, or let me find this job, or let me get this contract. There's no urgency to it. But sometimes you make dua to Allah and you need that response immediately. And I'm sure that all of us would have been in this situation where we are in like an emergency, where you need that response, you need that immediately. When I was in this Supermax prison, and I think about a year and a half into the imprisonment, and again, to describe that picture, it's a small cell, 4 steps by 2 steps, concrete everywhere. Mentally ill inmates are banging the doors all night and all day long, so you can't sleep. Pepper spray, almost every day officers are pepper spraying, they're bringing in pepper spray, and if they pepper spray someone in the cell next to yours, then it comes in through the vents, and then the prisoners will shout out to each other. I'm seeing 1 suicide attempt a week for 2 years, including three in 1 day. One of them actually went past someone's cell, and there was blood that was smeared all over the walls, and it smelled like a butcher's shop. So at that time, there was, at one point in my case, the paralegal, she came and she said, this is a letter that the US government has submitted to the court in your case, but we need to respond to it by the morning. So she's telling me this in the afternoon, and we have to give a response to the court by the morning. Now there's no phones, especially in that prison. I mean, prisons here, sometimes they have phones, but there's no phones there. You don't have mobile phones there. And I need to, in order to respond to this letter, I need to tell my lawyer that she needs this particular document. The problem is on the hard drive, there's 12 million documents relating to this case on that hard drive. So I need to tell her, find that document, and that will tell you basically how to respond to this document. I go back to my cell, and now I'm thinking, okay, now how do I tell my lawyer before the morning? I get 3 phone calls a week, and I have to apply for them a week in advance, and I've already finished my quota for that week. Shall I ask the lieutenant? But every time I've asked the lieutenant for an extra phone call, he says I don't have that authority. You have to ask in the daytime, you have to ask the warden. I thought, let me see if there's another prisoner that I know and trust, if he has a legal visit. A slim chance, because in that prison, people have not had legal visits for like 15 years, because all of these people have been convicted. Some of these are on death row. So I still asked a prisoner, a friend of mine, I still asked him, hey, do you have a legal visit tonight by any chance? Because I thought I'll pass the message to him, he would pass it to his lawyer, and his lawyer would go outside and tell my lawyer. And he said no. So now I'm stuck. What do I do? And then I made dua to Allah. And I said, these were my exact words. I said, Ya Allah, I said, I am stuck. I can't do anything. I said, you have to help me. I said, I can't phone, I can't pass a message any other way. I need her to basically, I need to tell her that that is the document that you need. I have 12 million documents. I said, you have to help me, Allah, you have to do it. And I need that done now. And that was about 10:30 p.m. at night. And then I went to sleep. So the next morning, the paralegal came back, and she said, here's the letter that your lawyer submitted to the court. But when I read that letter, I could not have written that document better. Basically, it was exactly as I wanted it to be written. So in the afternoon, she came, my lawyer came, and I asked her, I said, how did you write this letter? She said, I don't know. She said it was late at night, 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. I was on the sofa, I had the laptop, and I was just working through, and I was going through, and I was trying to look through this and how to respond to this. And something just told me, open this folder. Then I opened that folder. Then it's like something just guided me to open this folder, and that folder, and that folder, and then I ended up on this document. And when I saw this document, I thought, okay, this document is good. I think this is all I need. And I just took the information from there and I typed this response. And this happened twice, happened on 2 occasions, where the dua response, it happened immediately. Any examples you can share, either that happened with you or with other brothers during your time in Guantanamo, where someone was making a dua and it got answered instantly?
One of the amazing things in Guantanamo in particular was we were outside of solitary confinement where I was for 2 years. For the last few months I was put in cells on the blocks, and at that time in Camp Delta, Camp X-ray rather, we had 24 cells facing one another, so there's 48 in total. The person in cell 1 at Salah time would be the Imam. And the person in cell 48 wouldn't be able to hear what the Imam is saying. But for those who were kind of in the middle and before you hear, and in particular, there was, like, I'm sure you guys must have done it, but the dua and qunut, especially at the time of great calamity and difficulties, we used to do it in every prayer. Every single prayer we raise our hands in the last rak'ah. And one of the du'as that some brothers would make is for the guidance of our captors. It's rare, it don't happen often, because most of the time we were in a hostile situation, especially on the blocks. Not so much in solitary, but in the blocks. But like the Prophet used to say, Allah Azzal al-Islam bi-ahd al-Rayn, or Allah give honor to Islam, or honor to Umar al-Khattab, or Umar al-Hisham, aka Abu Jahl. So, in the same way, some of those who had knowledge and understanding would make dua for some of our captors to become Muslims. And so, a few years ago, a sister contacted me on Facebook, in the days when Facebook was okay. And she has a picture of a hijab. She's a hijab. And she messaged me. She said, "Brother, were you in Guantanamo?" I said, "Yes, I was." And she replied and said, "Well, so was I." And I said, "Well, there were no female prisoners there." She said, "I wasn't a prisoner. I was one of your guards." And I said, "You accepted Islam?" She said, "Yes." I said, "How? Tell me the story." She said, to paraphrase, that this was the first time I had ever interacted with Muslims in my life. And everything I really thought about them was in the debriefings that these people are intent on the destruction of Western way of life. So I became there with preconceived ideas about who you were. But then I saw how the weak amongst you was made strong by the other brothers around the Shoaib Brotherhood. And I saw how you lost everything except your faith. Everything was wrong for you. And I thought to myself that when I had troubles, I turned to boys, I turned to alcohol, I turned to drugs, I turned to everything except faith. And you have lost everything except faith. She said, "I fell in love with Islam." And I promised myself that when I go back to America, I will research this religion. I did, and that's why I took my shahada. So I want you to send my salams to the brothers, those who are released and those who are still there, and tell them their sisters pray for them.
So that's an example of a dua that you made there, and Allah.
And if I may, because this is one of the things that happens, we're seeing this now constantly, and it's one of the human beings by nature. When you do something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that we didn't oppress them, they oppress themselves. often you see people involved in oppression, it comes back to them. I cannot tell you the number of soldiers, including interrogators, and including people who served for years, who contacted me, even just 2 days ago. There's a woman who contacted me. She said, maybe you don't remember me, but I was one of the last people to see you off the plane. Please forgive me if I get anything wrong to you. Though she hadn't.
Yeah.
And the one that I want to mention to you, though, is this guy. His name is Paul. He says, brother, perhaps you don't remember me, but I was held with you. I was holding you in Babar. I was one of your guards. And I don't know what you did, to paraphrase, but I pray that I haven't jeopardized my hereafter for what I did and my role in that. He says that for that reason, I beg of you, my brother, please forgive me and do not stand as witness against me on the day of judgment. He's a Christian. And he says one more thing. He says, I suffered brain trauma injuries from a blast. So I picked up the Quran. He says, I read the Quran and the Kareem. And he said, nothing has given me more tranquility than reading that book. And then he says, ends by saying, you might want to know this, that I am Native American originally. And there's a whole history of why my people even joined the US military, for those who did. But my grandparents, based upon how we treated you, my grandparents were not even considered human beings, let alone citizens of this country, of my own country. So, I wanted to say that because there are, again, those who know me, there are so many also, some of you sitting in my house, who've asked for forgiveness, who want to show to themselves and to everybody else that I'm no longer like that. I think that's a really important part of our message as Muslims, that we remember that in the end, this isn't about winning or losing, it's about Gaza. And it's about people coming and embracing Islam from whichever direction.
Well, moving now to events closer to what is happening there today. I think one of the actual strongest voices in support of the Palestinians are former Israeli soldiers. And they have a group, you see them on social media, and they come and they talk about the instruction that they were given and what they were told. And they're sort of taking the lid off this so-called morality where they're talking about, all of these things. I remember when I was in the Supermax prison in America, a lot of the officers were former US Marines. And one of them, some of them I used to talk to, and one of them in particular, he had been, I think, 8 or 10 years, he'd done various tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we used to talk, and in some way, once he said to me, he goes, I see you as a soldier. I see you as like a fellow soldier. Like we may not have been on the same side, but I see you as a fellow soldier. And he was full of regret he said, our leaders, they sent us to war in Iraq, and we didn't know why we were going there. So we used to talk a lot. And I remember one conversation I had with him, and I said to him that I've read that there's many accounts where US soldiers, they took part in massacres of Iraqi civilians, of women and children. Did you witness anything like that when you were in Iraq? Or did you hear of something like that? And he said to me, and he was quite honest with me, he said in all honesty, he said when we were sent to Iraq, because we were scared out of our brains. All of us were scared. We just had one objective, which was to get back home, to his house, or to his bowling, to his dog, or his pickup truck, or whatever. We just had to get back home. And they told us, everyone here is your enemy. So we were so scared that there would just be a twitch, something would move, and we would unleash all our firepower on that. And he told me, because we meet these Humvees in Iraq. In Iraq it's 50 degrees Celsius in the summer. And then he goes, we've got helmets on, we've got body armor, and we're inside this thing, it doesn't have air conditioning. And he said the smallest thing would happen, and we would just open fire. So he said, yeah, to answer your question, he said a lot of these things, they did He himself not party to it, but he said, yeah, our soldiers did a lot of this. So, a lot of these, what we've been talking about, we've been talking about Guantanamo, about background, about prison. What we're trying to see is, the purpose of why we're talking about this is that when all hope is lost, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He provides His help in unimaginable ways. I know in the community at the moment, there is a lot of despair. People are really, it's affecting people in different ways. Women are taking it out on their children, husbands are taking it on their wives, and they don't know that this is the reason behind it. People are they're not finding happiness, that their sleep is affected, their mood is affected. It's because of Gaza. That's what it's because of that. Even if I even stop looking at the videos. I'll share them, but I don't actually scroll through to the videos at the end. It's just too painful to do that. So let me ask you that zooming out a little bit, Guantanamo, Bosnia, Syria, and other causes and things that you've been involved in your travels, you've traveled to different countries. What are some of the lessons you think that we can, if you were to pick like 2 or 3 lessons for us to take from what is happening in Gaza now, based on your whole life experience? What are something you could tell us that remember these 3 things, if you forget everything else?
Okay. Back when I was growing up as a kid, we only had 3 television channels. BBC 1, BBC 2, and ITV. That's it. The radio and the newspapers. If you wanted to know what's going on, those were your sources. Other than people individually going to places, coming back and relating the story. That's changed so much. So that everybody has their own newsfeed, and you choose what you want to know. So if you know what's going on, it's because you've chosen that. And if you don't know what's going on, that's also because you've made a decision not to know. One of the hardest things, like you would have come across, and I know you've experienced it, buried brothers, buried them with your hands, sometimes covered in their blood. Buried them, and having spent so much time with them like they're your own blood brothers. And having seen trauma of conflict zones and so forth. I can tell you, I don't think I ever cried as much from watching these videos of Gaza than I did when such brothers around me were killed. So what does that tell me? That tells me I'm making a choice of what I'm looking at. And it's making me react in ways that I didn't before. There were over 100,000 killed in Bosnia. There were 150,000 killed in Afghanistan in the Second War. 1 million killed in Iraq. Yet 20,000 are dead in Gaza. Why am I crying now more than I ever did? They used bombs in Afghanistan that's known as the mother of all bombs. The first one that they used was 15,000 pounds. The second was 22,000 pound bombs. I was there when the bombing began on Afghanistan. I witnessed it myself. But I've never cried so much as I've cried now. So what's the reason? And the reason is because this device that you have brings you the news instantly. And it's with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. You're getting a feed, I'm getting feeds right now as I'm speaking to you about a video or another of people getting massacred, whether it's people stripped naked, as you saw with some of the prisoners recently, or whether it's some of the children who are reciting the Quran while they're getting amputated upon because they have no anesthetic, they have no analgesic, therefore that's the only way they can find solace and tranquility. What we're seeing, Babar, is what we used to see but could never relay. People are relaying to us directly. That's the world in which we're in right now. And the intensity. Because in all these places we've seen the oppressors In Bosnia, there were rape camps where they wanted to force the Muslim women to give birth to the next generation of Serb enemy. So the atrocities were terrible. They were ripping open the stomachs of pregnant women to have bets to see whether the fetus is a boy or a girl. The atrocities were terrible. Just as bad, maybe even worse. But it's how we're visualizing that. So what I suggest people to do is just think about this. From the birth of time, from the time of Adam alayhi salam till now, those who are upon the haqq will always be in battle with those who are on batil. And just as you are a Muslim, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسِ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do people consider that they will say, I believe, and they will not be tested? The Quran is filled with verses about believing and being tested, one after the other. لِنَبْلُوكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. So, if we're not being tested as Muslims, it's because of the mercy of Allah. Because the nature of us as believers is that you will be tested. Sitting in front of you are two people who face some tests, but like Babar said, there's many who are facing tests we don't even know about. Whether it's a loss of a relative, the loss of arms and legs and body parts and health and wealth. You know, all of these things are a massive test for a believer. So we, just as we see the brothers and sisters in Palestine, what do you think, what's the message that comes to the whole world out of that? Remember I just said to you now, one sister who accepts Islam because she saw the action and the behavior of the prisoners. You know how many people are now accepting Islam because seeing the action and the behavior of the people of Palestine? It's become viral. It's actually viral that you see young girls from America and beyond saying, I am an atheist, but when I saw the response of the Palestinians, particularly the women and the children, I want to know where they're getting their strength from. I've just got my Quran. Then the next girl says, I've got mine. And the next one says, I've got mine. It's become like viral, as I said. So the lesson, rather than to give the 3 points, I would say simply this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا حَبَّ اللَّهُ قَوْمًا ابْتَلَاهُمْ. When Allah loves a people, He tests them. And we should always hope that Allah loves us, but not hope that He tests us. But when He does, that we do it with isti'ana, bis-sabr was-salah.
One of the most, regarding the situation, one thing that I wanted to share is one of the most remarkable things that I think it was sometime last year, that I went to an event at a dinner in central London, which was attended by the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Moazzam. A very warm, genuine man, full of love and full of life. Very genuine, warm smiles. So he gave a speech, and it was different to any speech I've heard about Palestine or the Palestinians before. And this is how he started. He said, I can tell you about such and such group of people were killed, or this massacre happened, or these people were put in prison, or these tortures happened. He said, I'm not going to tell you that, because you can get all of these stories, you can find them. I'm going to tell you another story. And then he told the story of a particular, a young, like 11-year-old boy who set up some sort of ice cream business, and he's going around selling it. And then he told about how the Palestinians, how they made like drainage systems. Then he spoke about how they're rebuilding. Then he spoke about how he said 75 years. He said, we are still here. We're not only surviving, but we are thriving. He said, that is good news for us, and is not good news for our enemy. So if you look back, like at the moment we're thinking, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my lifetime. And in 1948, when Deir Yassin, when the Nakba, the catastrophe happened, and the Israelis, when the state of Israel was formed, and they ethnically cleansed and committed genocide of Palestinians all over Palestine. At that time, they call it Nakba, the catastrophe, meaning this is possibly the worst thing that could happen. And you would have thought that that's the end of the Palestinians, they'll be finished. But they're still here. They're still here. 75 years on, they are still here. And what is happening now, and I remember that when this war, when Israelis, when they started to this latest round, I don't want to call it war, but the latest round of the killing of the Palestinians, when it started, I exchanged some messages with a friend of mine, a brother who also has been involved in dawah and activism since the 90s. And he didn't seem bothered or plussed at all. He said this is the beginning of the end for them. He said the countdown has started. The countdown has started. So when we look at these situations, as painful and sad as it is, zoom out and zoom back in time. And Allah says that in the Quran. He says that in the Quran. Look, just travel around the earth and look at the ends of those who came before you. 75 years, that's not an empire. Persian Empire was 500 years. They ruled most of the world. Greek Empire, Roman Empire, these are empires. 75 years is like nothing, it's like a little child. 500 years. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He humbled these empires through ragtag armies on like camels and horses with bows and arrows and swords. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His own plan. For those that have been killed, they are in Jannah. And one of the blessings of this situation, entire families. Because imagine if 40 members of the family are gone and one guy remains. He's going to live in hell until he dies. Allah took all of them. All of them are together. They don't have to worry about getting electricity for 3 hours a day up there. They're all together. And in 300,000 years' time from now, this will be a fleeting memory. Yeah, remember, we're living in that place in Khan Yunis and there was that bomb that dropped us and oh yeah, whatever. Anyway, let's go and enjoy this scenery now. Let's go and eat this fruit. So let's go to that river. They're not even going to even remember it. Those children, they are with Ibrahim alayhi salam right now. He's taking care of them right now. I read this quote, someone said that the highway to Jannah, from Gaza to Jannah, that highway is very busy at the moment. It's crowded. So as difficult as it is, Islam has faced many calamities before. It's many crises before. But look, we're still here. We're still here. We're not going anywhere. And that in itself is a hope. Oh, they're going to empty the land. They're going to erase the land. And where are the Palestinians going to go? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will find a way. He found a way for Yunus alayhi salam from the belly of that whale, and He will make a way out for them.
I was sitting with a Jewish rabbi this last week, practicing Orthodox Jewish rabbi, and he said something that most people would be afraid to say. He said, we have to work for and pray for the dismantlement of the state of Israel. Most of us would be afraid to say that nowadays because they're going to get accused of all sorts of things. But he said it as a practicing Orthodox Jew who lives by the Torah. And he said, in his view, peacefully, that it should happen. But nonetheless, it must happen. Because it is a nation that's built upon oppression, and he, as he believes, as a Jew, as a practicing Jew, against rebelliousness against God. And he said it's not a thing too difficult to consider. In our lifetime, we have seen the end of an empire known as the Soviet Union, which broke its back in Afghanistan. In fact, in Babar, where we were held, the writing on the walls was still in Russian from the places that had been built by this first occupier. And the second occupier also withdrew in humiliation from there. So he said, we've seen that happen. We've seen also apartheid South Africa disintegrate. It used to be an apartheid state. Israel has been labeled an apartheid state by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, and by Beit Salam, which is an Israeli human rights organization, all of whom say that Israel operates apartheid rules on the Palestinians. So it is not too far from your imagination to consider that Israel, what it's doing and how it's been thus far, will come to an end. And I personally think that there's nothing wrong in hoping and praying for and working for the end of that state.
We had, a few weeks ago, we had Dr. Moazzam, who's a Palestinian, and he was sitting right there, he was talking. And he said, I think someone asked the question, what do Palestinians see as the future? Because you know, people say that if you're calling for the end of Israel, you're calling for like the genocide of all Jews, and he said no. He said there should be one state where everyone is equal. He said Jews are welcome to live there. Even those people that are there now, they are welcome to live there. But they have to be treated equally to the Palestinians. They're not looking, even now, and that's quite remarkable, even now, after everything that has happened, they're not looking for their blood. They're not looking that, okay, we're going to go out and do it. They said, you're welcome to continue living there. There should be one state, and there should be equal rights for all citizens in that. In the last 15 minutes, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the floor for some questions. Questions, not speeches, please. Okay, if you want to give a longer comment, then you can give that. You can come and give that afterwards. A question that people may benefit from. So you can. What's the best way? How are we going to do this? You just give that. Are we going to just give that to whoever wants to ask a question, or do they have to come up, or how do we do it? Okay, you speak from the floor now, and then I'll just repeat the question. So I don't have a very good memory, so that's why keep the question short, please, and I'll relay it. Okay, let's start with this young man here.
How did you get picked up from the American people?
Who is this question to? Brother Moazzam? Okay, how did you get picked up from the American people?
Considering both being picked up by the American people. Yeah. Babar has more experience than me. You know, often people say to me, would you go back to America? And I say, I've never been to America, America's been to me. So I was living in Pakistan at the time in 2001, and at the end of the year, a bunch of people stormed in my house, including American CIA agents, and they took me by force with a gun to my head into their custody.
Does that answer your question? Okay. With all the young people out there, the new generation.
How long did you stay in Guantanamo Bay?
I spent a total of 3 years in prison, 1 year in Babar and 2 years in Guantanamo.
Asim?
He doesn't have the right to answer questions. He knows the two
I said
others.
Asim, and then both, it's like we got two Asims to ask the question. So let's have that Asim at the back first then.
Brother, what's your view on participating in things like protests and using the political system in the UK? What's your opinion on how to engage?
So the question is what is your view on participating in protests and the political system to affect change? Moazzam?
But participating in the political process and protests are two different things. Protest is the right that everybody has, and I encourage people to be involved in protest in whichever way they can. Protest isn't just street protest, by the way. Protest can be your voice in different manners and in different ways, and indeed that can enter political process if you so choose to do so. Personally, I don't enter that for my own particular opinion. I think it has damaged our community a lot, especially in recent times. So I don't advocate that at all. However, there are many spaces where you can do things where you thought that you couldn't. And one of them, again, we spoke about, social media, the way that is. That really is a space that our enemies didn't ever think that the voice of Muslims and fighting for justice would ever become prevalent, and it has. So that's one place where I think squarely, in particular in this case the Zionists, are losing that fight. They are, in fact, I think they've lost it already. But in relation to political engagement, there are different ways to engage. You can engage through Cage, my organization that I'm with, they do it all the time, but not in the traditional way, not in the way of saying, yes, we get involved in political parties and vote for one against another, when in fact, both, if you look at the Conservatives and the Labour, I can't see any difference between them in relation to the view of person.
One of the most effective things that all of us can do here. You know, there's a strategy in war, and it's called death by 1,000 cuts. And it's on focusing on the little victories. And let me give you an example. So there's this group on, there's a social media profile, a Twitter profile called Stop Zionist Hate. And what they do is, I think they call it like a Zionist of the Week. They find one guy or woman who could be a medical doctor. There's been medical doctors on there. Could be a professor. Could be a teacher somewhere of the world who's been promoting genocide and laughing at pictures of dead babies and things like that. They get this person's details. They get their where they work. They get the name of their boss and the email addresses, and they say just contact this person. So people start sending all of these messages, and within a few days, that person comes out with a groveling apology, or a statement comes out from his university or from his employer saying this person no longer works for us. Tick, on to the next one. So what that does is that first of all, it gives this, it gives you this buzz. Because Israel, what are we going to do? They massacred all of these people. Focus on these little victories. And once you get one of these little victories, then share it like crazy. Tell everyone about it. Because then that motivates people to do more. And it doesn't take much. It's completely legal. It doesn't take much. A little email to the employer. I saw that your employer, your professor employed by your department, he said this. Are these the values that your organization stands for? I saw people, there was some woman who gave some threats to some Muslim woman in Canada, and she's an author. So I went up to her Amazon page, and I saw all of a sudden, there's 75 one-star reviews, and people are saying the book didn't make sense. So they made it out like they'd actually read the book. And they're writing comments totally disjointed, very poorly written, and it lost the plot all along. And that woman, all of a sudden, she's got a 1 star. That's the end of her income rate. And then she came out groveling. So these little victories are really important. They give you some entertainment, and they give you a sense of, they give you a buzz as well. Just wanted to share that. Not sure what feels quite what you were looking for. Ishaq has a question back there.
Say to Muslims who might think, well, you mentioned the stories of what we say rationalists would believe are sort of supernatural, like you mentioned about the sky people. What would you say to those Muslims who just think these are too fantastical? We have a strain amongst us, especially growing up in the West, that we look at and interpret Islam through this very materialistic, and not as in money, but as this sort of rationalist and materialist manner. And yet, there is something there that both of you have experienced, and you can't really put a finger on it. Do you have any other stories like that, or how would you describe that to Muslims who think, these are just made up stories? It's something the mind's playing.
Very good question. So it's hard to ask a question that, what would you say to those Muslims who find it difficult to rationalize or believe some of the fantastical stories that you mentioned, like sky people, for example, things like that, where especially us in the West, we become very, we've been influenced that we find it difficult to believe that these things, come on, did they actually really happen or not? That's your question, yeah? So what would you say to these people? Moazzam?
I remember I read a book Ayat al-Rahman fi Jihad al-Afghan, which you probably heard of Sheikh Abdullah. And he talks, this book is about the miracles that were witnessed in Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation. And he was a Palestinian. Sheikh Abdullah was a Palestinian who fought, so you understand how old this conflict is, in the 70s, 60s and 70s, and left after a year and a half because he felt that what was happening there was becoming too secular. However, his aim and objective was to build an army, a reliable Muslim, believing army that feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Afghanistan in order for it to come and liberate Al-Quds. That was his view. That's what he wanted to do. And in his book, he makes repeated reference to things that you would say are from the metaphysical world. And people would often say to him, well, why? The companions of the Prophet ﷺ didn't have as many miracles as these guys had. And they made a point. How come they didn't see the miracles, yet these guys need to? And his answer was, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the miracle was the Quran. It was the unchanged ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. And they had, for their iman, to boost their iman, they had the Prophet ﷺ themselves. At this time, they required karamat, or miracles, small miracles, to boost their iman. And Afghanistan is an important example, because Afghanistan is what brought about the end of an empire, which was the Soviet Union. More than any of the other places, it was this. Yet there were examples, as Babar said. There's one brother, you want to ask him for, does anybody know any other stories? There's one brother I know personally, I took him to Bosnia. I didn't see this myself, but he told me the story. That they were on an attack at a hill where there was a Serb machine gun nest. And they were firing at the brothers, and they couldn't move. So they were pinned down, and every time they tried to raise their heads up, this heavy machine gun is firing at them. And then they observed the firing stopped. And they couldn't tell why the firing had stopped. But the two people who were there, the machine gunner and the guy who's helping him, had stopped. And what he saw with his eyes is that one of the gunners is on his back and his legs are kicking in the air. And something is dragging him, but he can't see anything dragging him. Eventually they took that hill, got there, and they saw the man, the guy, the gunner, and he's lying, face looking upwards with his face contorted like it's in terror. There was nobody else there. And so this is just another example of what do you do if you're a witness to this? And the naysayers say, well, that can't be true. Well, you know, as in Arabic they say, لَيْسَ الْخَبْرُ كَالْعَيَانَ. You know, hearing about something and seeing something are two different things.
Do you know, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, a researcher from New York University, a non-Muslim researcher, he came from New York to interview me. Someone had referred him. Specifically, his research was on karamat, was on miracles in battlefields. That's what his whole research was about. And he came there, and we met here in coffee bags. We met here, and for about 2 hours, and I just told him all the stories and things ones that I had witnessed myself, or that I had heard relayed to me firsthand. And I think one thing I said to him, so I told him the example of when I smelled perfume from, I think I relayed it on my YouTube channel, one of the stories, where I smelled perfume from the body of a brother that had been killed that had been dead for 8 days. It wasn't just me who smelled that. And there was dozens of brothers who smelled that at the same time. Now, there's doctors here, I'm sure there's psychologists and psychiatrists here as well. Okay, maybe someone will say, okay, maybe you were having a psychotic episode. Okay, maybe I was. But what is the chances of like 25 people having a psychotic incident at exactly the same time who are from different backgrounds and from different, what are the chances of that happening? The only logical explanation is that it's true. Hasnain? After Hasnain, we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll round up, inshallah.
Well, I just wanted to go the other way. I just wanted to ask you about your sort of human emotions. Maybe fear, maybe hope wasn't as strong. It's just because people might be having their own tests at the moment, and we don't want them to think that it's wrong to feel those human emotions, because those are real emotions people have. And we've heard about karamat and miracles, and sometimes people think that there's something wrong with them and they're not getting those miracles. So I just want you to just ground it a bit more for us, which is, what emotions did you have? And almost the permission that it's okay to have those difficult emotions. Doesn't mean your iman is less or that you don't believe in Allah, but there are, what are the difficult, you answered it a little bit earlier, but what were those difficult emotions that you felt, and it's okay to feel like that?
Very good question. What were the difficult emotions that you felt? What are the human emotions? Because sometimes people, when they're struggling, or if they're not seeing these miracles, or even this taboo that exists sometimes in our understanding or culture, that it's wrong to feel despair, or it's wrong to feel afraid, or it's wrong to feel this way. So the question was that, talk about some of the, in your audios, talk about some of the real human emotions that you felt.
I think that there have been a multitude of times, several times, where the emotions I would describe as pure terror, horror, fear, apprehension. One of the times when they put a bag on my head, immediately you feel terror, and it's designed to do that. I once walked in a place where we were in a minefield, and a brother a few meters in front of me, he stepped on a mine, and his leg blew off right in front of my eyes. At that moment, I was petrified with terror. Petrified. I mean, so scared. I don't know. The next place I step, my leg's going to go to, maybe somebody else. In that moment, I saw somebody else come along, completely oblivious to the fear that he faced. I'm telling you, I'm frozen with terror, but he's not. He comes along, he picks him up, and he carries him out. And I looked at his footsteps, and I followed his footsteps. I said, if this guy don't go, no, I'm going to walk. But the point is, sometimes you are so taken by fear. In Babar, I wrote this letter to my parents, to my father. And after everything I had gone through, I was begging, please send me to Guantanamo. I can't take it here anymore. And in that letter I wrote that I am beginning to lose the fight against despair and hopelessness. So of course, anybody who goes through situations like conflict, prison, and so forth, if they say they're not suffering from different aspects of trauma, which they can't even begin to understand at that point, they'd be telling a fib. And this is no different, actually, when we read the stories of the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ. There's so much. It's important that even from our Islamic traditions, nowhere does it say that you are equal to angels. Nowhere does it say that they didn't face massive tests. You know, the verse of the Quran says, وَالزُّلْزِلُ حَتَّى يَقُولُ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. So this verse is about the test. Do people think that they'll be enter judgment, they won't be tested? And the verse continues and said that the earth underneath their feet shook like an earthquake until the Prophet and those who believed said, when will the help of Allah come? So this means that it's quite natural and normal for people to feel in a place where there could be despair, could be hopelessness, could be fear and apprehension and all of that stuff. It's very normal. It's how you deal with that is what we all need to learn from, inshallah.
Do you know, one of the things that has, especially in the last few years, that has come about is this concept of this fake masculinity, where you've got to hold it in. And I always give this example as, imagine someone has a big meal, and after that he feels the need to go to the toilet, but he holds it in. A day goes by, he's really struggling now, and someone says to him that, bro, like, why is your face like that? And he goes, I'm holding it in. And then they say to him, well done brother, have sabr, hold it in, be strong. Then a week goes by, so don't let your wife see you like this. That don't let your wife see you release this. Okay, hold it in, because she'll think you're more of a man. We're laughing, but that's what it is. And I saw it in prison all the time. Yeah, man, yeah, yeah, I'm okay, man, I'm strong, I'm mentally strong, you know, I just, like, any negative thoughts, I just block it out. And like, yeah, I can handle prison, I can deal with it. And then you see him crying down the phone to his family. One of the ways that I personally, I'm not talking about anyone else, one of the ways that I got through my time in prison is, you know, it takes energy to be fake. I just tried to be honest and tried to be authentic. And the brothers here that were in prison with me, and I hope they will, you know, testify to that. I would knock on a brother's door and I would go and say, brother, I'm really feeling down today. Can you tell me some words to lift me up? That's it. This space has gone, especially amongst men. Our egos are so fragile. Lord forbid someone finds out that I'm struggling, I'm finding it difficult. I can't find a job, I'm struggling. I can't, I'm finding it difficult with my kids, I'm struggling with anger issues or whatever it is. Lord forbid someone find out, you're a human being. And the Sahaba, who are actually real men, they did it all the time. All the time you see them going and they're talking and expressing emotions and crying and seeking help. So where is this fake masculinity thing that, who are we trying to fool? You feel something, you need help, go and share and give space to your brothers for that. Give space, and especially men have this problem, such a mental health crisis, suicide, family suffering, domestic violence, all because men's egos, our egos are so fragile that we're not afraid, that we are so afraid to accept something's wrong, I need help, or we're afraid to get that help. Create those spaces, those safe spaces where we can go to each other and say, bro, I'm really struggling man at the moment. I've got this problem. And be there for your brothers. And even with this Gaza thing that's happening, you know, if you're struggling, talk, be there for each other. You know, that is one of it's not just something that is okay to be. The brother said that it's okay to feel this way. It's obligatory to feel this way. Because Allah created all these emotions, otherwise He wouldn't have created fear. He wouldn't have created all of these emotions. He wouldn't have spoken about them in the Quran. Two more questions. This brother was a quick one, and then yourself.
I'm not sure how to phrase it. Generally, if you look at pro-Israeli rhetoric at the moment, it calls for like they can openly call for genocide, call for Muslims, you know, plus animals or whatever else. But as Muslims, we feel like if you say anything, it's anti-Semitism, anti-this, anti-that, or you might get locked up just for expressive views. How do we almost kind of change that narrative and break that? Because I feel like they've won in the sense that we can't say anything. We can't say anything against them in fear of what might happen to us, or we might get locked up. But how do we actually kind of break that narrative so they don't have that stronghold over the Muslim community? To say anything, not calling for violence, but anything, you worry about the repercussions.
So the question was that we see the pro-Israeli rhetoric, and they're openly calling for genocide and calling the Palestinians human animals. They can do whatever they want. But as Muslims now, from the other side, the pro-Palestinian voices, how do you counteract that without, you know, through legal means, or that narrative is so strong, and anything you say then is immediately shut down as anti-Semitism. So how do you counter that?
It's a very good question, brother. A lot of people are asking that question. First of all, I just want to say that we have been going through this, not now, it didn't just start now, it didn't start on the 7th of October. The entire period of the war on terror, if you want to begin from there, the entire language we have been trying, or some of us have been trying to challenge. Our community was slow in the uptake, but eventually took it on. And it took it on because we recognized that it wasn't just, they're not just going for the people in militant organizations, they're going for the lowest common denominator. And That's where our strength lies, in our numbers and in our voices and in our experience. So one of the things when you say that we can't say anything, with the greatest of respect, I challenge you on that. We can say a lot, and we are saying a lot. And if we weren't saying it, then the narrative wouldn't be changing. We're seeing one after another of these Zionists fall apart. At least their arguments are. And we're seeing ordinary white British people and Europeans in general and Americans listening to. Now, had we remained silent, that's the lesson of Guantanamo. Had we remained silent, all of the oppressors and everybody involved in jailings would say, look, it's nothing wrong with it, nobody's complaining. And if you think that you're going to get locked up for a tweet, I really want people to think about this. His Babar Ahmad spent 12 years in prison.
11. You just added again.
What's a number between friends? I spent 3. There's a brother right in the back spent, 10 years in prison. Another brother spent several years in prison. This room is full of people who've had various experiences. I'm going to ask anybody, what's wrong with a little bit of prison for the sake of justice? I'm serious, I don't mean this as... Do you know who the most celebrated man in the world up until recently was? The most celebrated, most respected. Who? Mandela. Why? Why is Mandela... Why do they have a statue of Mandela outside the British Parliament? Why? Is it because he believed in the democratic process and through the ballot box that we need to fight oppression? Or was it because he took up the struggle against apartheid, for which he said at court, it's something I'm prepared to live for, I've been living for, and I'm prepared to die for? Our history is full of ulama and people and ordinary people, Palestinians. Look at how many hundreds of them, thousands of them, children, going to prisons for throwing a stone against a tank. We should not self-censor. They've been self-censored. So what? If they say, we're going to arrest you, wouldn't that be an honor? Wouldn't it be an honor to be arrested for something that you know there's a fight against injustice? That means the one that is arresting you is the one that's unjust, that's oppressive. I'm not telling people to break the law. But when the law itself is oppressive, slavery was a law, hiding Jews from the Nazis was the law. Not every law is moral and right. So I'm not asking you to break the law, but I'm not asking you to worship it either. And simply say, do not self-censor, and especially because, as I said, I quoted to you a Jewish rabbi. I can quote to you survivors of the Holocaust, hundreds of them, who've called and condemned Israel and have called for its dismantling. If they can do it, why can't we as people do it?
I think just to clarify is, do not be reckless, do not break the law. There's many things that you can do legally, but sometimes, even when you are doing things legally, then you can end up in prison or whatever. So I think that's the way you put it is, don't break the law, but don't worship the law either. Just because it's there doesn't mean.
Yeah, I mean the main thing.
Don't be reckless.
Yeah, the main thing I want to say here is that if you think that it's reckless to do a tweet against Israel, it's not. You can do it, and that's part of the self-censorship. So one of the things that it's part of the fear we have as a community, and we've seen it for decades, for a couple of decades, is that we say that this will happen. If Babar and Moazzam sit in the masjid and talk about something, someone's going to come and kill us with a drone strike. Perhaps they'll arrest us. Perhaps they'll send us to Guantanamo Bay. No, they won't. No, they won't. But I'm saying if somebody does oppress you, then it's okay. It's okay because you're being oppressed. You didn't initiate something that's wrong. But don't self-censor to the point of saying, we can't do this and we can't do that. Wallahi, I have never seen such sustained, continued protests for anything in this country that we've seen with the past life.
think all I'll add to that is if you actually go out into the wider community and you talk to, especially the younger generation, you talk to English people, you talk to people that are not Muslim, you look in hospitals and universities, there are a lot of people that are not buying it anymore. You know the story of the boy who cried wolf? He only cried wolf 3 times. He didn't cry wolf 769 million times. Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism. Okay, you said it, but now no one takes it seriously. And there is anti-Semitism. But in my view, and I could be wrong, that so many Jews have now come out against the state of Israel that anti-Semitism, arguably, there's an argument that is actually decreased. Because people like Muslims, for example, that are thinking that, okay, so they used to think I was all Jews. Now they're going on these protests and they're seeing proper practicing Orthodox Jews with them. Or Jewish people shutting down like the Grand Central Station in New York, for example. And they're realizing that, no, this is not a religion thing. And this is not, these are the real Jews or these are the genuine Jewish people. I really just had the last question that I promised this brother, and then we're going to wrap up because we are very pressed for time. Last question, brother.
As we've all seen for the last 2 months, the world seen that they've broken international law. Just from your viewpoint, what is the reason why not one Muslim military is intervening? As in, what's stopping them? It's clear-cut evidence, and no one's getting involved. And what do you believe is?
Question was, you see in the last 2 months, we're seeing it on our phone, we're seeing all the atrocities, we're seeing all the evidence, all of these international laws have been broken, but not a single army of a Muslim country has intervened. Why is that?
I believe that those are 2 different questions. One is the breaking of international law. I'm completely clear in my mind. You have the head of the United Nations Human Rights Section Commission. He resigned. His name is Craig Moazzam. He said that what's taking place right now in Gaza is textbook genocide. And many people have said this. You have Antonio Guterres, who also essentially said that what's taking place didn't happen from a vacuum. He's explained that this is a continuous process that's happened over 60, 70 years. So I think in international law, in relation to, as I said, that it's already been, the question often is asked, right, is that does Israel have the right to self-defense, right? And the question that really needs to be asked is that a nation that carries out genocide, a nation that operates apartheid, a nation that's involved in ethnic cleansing, does that nation have the right to self-defense? That's the correct question. Did South Africa have the right to self-defense against anti-apartheid? That's the question. So in my view, that's been totally violated again and again and again, and there are a multitude of United Nations resolutions that Israel has constantly, for the past 50-odd years, broken. Why is there no will? Because primarily in the United Nations, of the Security Council, there are 5 permanent members, 3 of which are not only the supporters of Israel, they help to found the state. So every time somebody suggests even the idea of a peacekeeping force, you ask yourself, why is there no peacekeeping force there? Well, because it's vetoed every time by the ones that gave birth to Israel in the first place. And why the neighbors have never taken part, or since the 73 at least, no country has intervened as a nation, is because it's a harsh reality, is that they were defeated. They were defeated, that's the first part. The second part is everybody's terrified of a massive regional war. Terrified. And I think that I don't want to, I'm not of the view of let the Muslim armies come and liberate you. They're not going to do that. Because the Muslim armies, if you look in every single country, in my view, from Egypt to Pakistan to Syria, the only people they attack and kill are their own people. So to ask those, to suggest, even think that they're going to come to the liberation of the Palestinians, is like asking Abu Jahl to come to the rescue of the Muslims at the Battle of Badr. That's how I feel. That's how I feel towards them. Others may have different views. The people who are going to liberate Palestine or not are primarily going to be the Palestinians. That could include the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank, in Jordan, because primarily the onus is upon them. And they feel it the most. They feel it more than anybody else. But finally, just to say that this thing is that everybody's terrified of an escalation. Meaning, what's happening to the Palestinians, because you see it happening, say, to the Egyptians, to the Turks, to the Syrians. Not that nothing else has happened to them before. But the entire region, everybody's terrified. And so, that's one of the things we have to contend with. That the armies that exist in these regions, they are not there to protect Islamic Muslims. They're to protect their states.
That's what are you saying right now, in this whole 2 billion population, we don't actually have any Muslim armies. They're all just fake and they're there to oppress us.
I'm just going to ask you a simple question. The question is, are all these armies, we don't have any Muslim armies. I'm going to ask you this question. Afghanistan was occupied for 20 odd years. Can you think of one Muslim army that came to help liberate it? Who liberated it? Who fought the occupation? That's your answer.
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think we're going to round off, and just before we finish, just some final words from Moazzam and then myself, and then we'll finish. Just some final words about happiness. What's something for everyone to take away?
I mean, for everybody, you know, Babar has explained that the brothers have asked questions here. Everybody has a feeling towards what's happening. But he's right, especially for some of us older guys with whiter beards, is that we've been seeing this stuff happen for years and years on end. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never removed that passion from us. So pray Allah never removes from that, from your care and love for the Ummah. It's important that it remains. That we always try to do something, even a word of truth. أفضل الجهاد كلمة حق عند السلطان الجائر. Best jihad is to speak a word of truth in front of an oppressor. So don't think that your words and your ability to, whatever ability you have, doesn't count. It does count. And we used to hear this. I used to hear this you know, when I was in Guantanamo in solitary confinement, and I used to hear through some of the guards who shared information with me that they weren't supposed to. They said millions of people have been demonstrating on the streets against the war. That used to bring me hope. And when the Palestinians, they know that the protest is going to do nothing. But what it will do is tell them that you are not forgotten by the ordinary people. They know that the governments and the rulers of this world have abandoned them and are against them. But they know that the people have not. So inshallah, just keep that in your minds. And nothing is stronger. Nothing is stronger than the dua in the last third of the night when you stand by yourself and you raise your hands. Nothing's more powerful than that.
I think all I would say is don't lose hope. I remember when I was young and I would go to talks like this, and at that time it was still Palestine, the first, like in 87, when the first Intifada started, I was like 13. And I used to go to talks like this, and I would be full of despair, despondent, and I would find it amazing that older people who would like lived and seen through so much, and they'll just sit there relaxed and calm, and they say, look, everything will be okay, you know, trust in Allah, it'll all be okay. But they were right. So don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. This is all part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. Don't lose hope. Take care of each other. Do some self-care. It's okay to not watch Gaza news for like a day. It's not going to end your life. It's not going to make you a hypocrite or something. It's okay not to watch every last video down to the end or share it. It's okay to do that. It's okay to take a few days off and replenish yourself. It's okay. Don't lose hope. Don't be in despair. This is all part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan. And one day I hope that in maybe 4 or 5 years time or 10 years time or whatever, you will come back and you'll say that, you know what, I remember what you said, that everything is going to work out. And that's what happened, because I saw that happen in my life. So I hope that you will see that. So I just wanted to, Friday Circle is a little circle we've been meeting for like over 30 years or so. We have a main event every now and then. We got a smaller fight thing will happen. Call it a fight. A smaller event next week. I'll be giving a circle that'll be downstairs about how to have more courage. So that'll be at the same time, Friday, 7:30 after Isha, downstairs, Insha'Allah. And I just wanted to thank everyone here for coming. And I know people have come here from far. And just thank Brother Moazzam and his hardy driver who drives him around everywhere.
I just want to say one thing before we end, right? So, Babar made a comment about my accent when we started. He said, oh, he doesn't have a Brummy accent. But Babar has a London accent like most of you do. The reason why I don't have a Brummy accent is because as a child, I studied at a Jewish school. I'm not joking. I studied at a Jewish school, a Jewish primary school. And all my best friends were Muhammad and Ali and Fatima. They were Misha and Bianca and Daniel. Right? And so that's one of the reasons why I don't have that accent, is because I went to the local Jewish school. Now the amazing thing about that school is called King David, and we used to wear the Moazzam, the Star of David, on our blazers and our caps. Because there's been an exodus of a lot of the Jewish people and more Muslims, the majority of people in that school now are Muslims.
Thank you for sharing that. So thank you for Brother Moazzam and all of you for coming. This talk has been recorded, yes, and it will be put on YouTube. Inshallah, at some point soon it will be put on YouTube, so if you benefited from it, you can.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي